Our firstborn daughter has, I would say always. When I say that, I mean from the time she was just a little bitty 2-year old girl, she's always wanted to be a teacher. I think some of that was that firstborn thing. We're going to be large and in charge. But some of it was just the sincere desire to be a teacher. And, well, she is. She's in her mid 40s now and a first grade teacher and stellar at teaching first graders, which, if you know anything about early childhood development education, you realize that's a very pivotal role. And so, anyway, she does great at it. I I wouldn't be a good first grade teacher, but I do love to teach. Um, just if the subject is right, okay. Now there are a lot of people, and I think probably all of us in our school experience encountered folks who were teachers who probably shouldn't have been teachers because they didn't like teaching. They didn't like students. They probably liked their subject, but sometimes not. And how they ever got into it must have been they took a turn in their prep for a career, which turned out to be a dead end, and they couldn't turn around and go somewhere else. So, boom, they're stuck teaching. Well, you know what that means? We're stuck with them as students. That's not a great recipe. It's not a good formula for learning. People who teach need to desire to be a teacher. That has to be part of their, I don't know, this inner thing, a drive, almost a drive, and sometimes a very real drive to be a teacher. Now, there are lots of wrong reasons to want to be a teacher, and we could spend a long time on those, and no doubt there's an army of folks who are teaching for what I would judge as a wrong reason. But there is I don't know how you would judge equal, but there is another army of men and women who are teaching for what I think is the right reasons. Number one, they are wired for it. God has made them, their temperament and their makeup and their personhood is right for teaching. Number two, He's called them to it. See, in my opinion, I don't care whether it's a school teacher, or a teacher in another context and setting, in business, a career setting, just a life setting. Teachers need to be called by God, and I believe He does. Now, why am I talking about all this? Well, because Paul writes to Timothy in chapter 1 of 1 Timothy, verse 7. And he's talking about these people who have, and giving them the full benefit of the doubt, they've just lost their way. By a little more probably realistic assessment is they took the wrong turns. They chose poorly. And they have, in verse 6, they've departed from the three things Paul talks about that are essential for pursuing God's heart: a pure heart, a good conscience, and sincere faith. In verse 6, some have departed from these and turned to meaningless talk. They want to be teachers of the law, but they do not know what they're talking about or what they so confidently affirm. This would be like me teaching math. I think I've told you that. I do not have a math brain. And some people would say, oh, yes, you do. You just haven't disciplined your brain. Whatever. I'm not good at math. And at this point in my life, I'm not going to discipline myself to be good at math. I have calculators, I have friends. I can pay, and I don't want to pay a lot, although it is worth a lot to pay somebody to do the math for me. But, well, when a teacher is unqualified and teaches anyway, or when they are maybe they have certifications, but that doesn't qualify them to be a teacher with that level and kind of authority. That's what these people are. They want to be, they have this driving desire to be teachers of the law. And there's a couple of things on that. They want to be, but big but. James talks about this. He says, not many of you should aspire to be teachers, because we know that those of us who teach will be judged more strictly. Now, we're not judged more severely, but we are judged more strictly. Why? Because the influence of our teaching goes well beyond ourselves. It's not just a matter of what choices will I make that will affect my life. It has to do with what choices will these students of mine make as I instruct and teach them that will affect their lives. And let's just run this on out. Generationally, it doesn't stop with that student. It doesn't stop with me. It goes on and on. There are generations of people who are stuck in ruts because back, 3 generations ago, somebody started making, pardon me, allergy season for me, started making wrong, inappropriate, unwise choices. And interestingly, it's interesting to me, some of those choices had direct impact on the chooser. Others, the impact didn't come till later down the line generationally. And you see that. There are folks who are struggling against patterns that have been in their family. Are they in their genes? I don't think so. Now, I mean, certain illnesses and vulnerabilities to illness, yeah, that's probably genetic. But I don't think most of the time the choices we make are not driven by genetics. But they are driven by patterns that are repeated in the lives of people that we have in our life, we honor, we respect, or who have dominated us. Okay, it gets real psychological here. But the point is, a teacher's influence goes beyond what happens in that classroom. And it isn't like, well, do the best you can and go on. Yeah, there is an aspect of do the best you can because you're not responsible for what that kid does, but you are responsible for what you do to pour into. I've told you before, I was a youth minister for 17 and a half years, and by the way, that half year was a big deal. If you've ever worked with junior high kids, 6 months is a big deal. Well, I did it because I loved doing it, and honestly, this is a true, honest confession. I started doing it because I thought it'd be cool and fun. I got into it and realized I'm pretty good at this, and I loved that kids thought I was cool. Some kids did. A lot of kids didn't, but some kids did, and that was enough, right? So Yeah, the attraction of youth ministry for me was an ego stroke. I have to admit that. Honesty requires it. And yet there was this piece where especially as I began to mature, I realized every kid that I get to interact with needs another voice of positive influence, and in my best moments, godly influence. This was a stewardship. I don't think early in my youth ministry career, I didn't think about that. I just thought about, let's go have some fun. What can we do together? Let's open the Bible together. I loved learning and teaching from Scripture, and I loved watching the light bulbs come on as kids began to get a little bit of the message. Now I look back on it and think I would do some things differently. I at one time, not long after I transitioned from youth ministry into family ministry, I sat down and I made a list of things. If I could do it again, I would. These are the things I would do differently. And at the top of that list was I would devote myself to my kids more than I devoted myself to every other kid in the county. Well, there were other things, but generally, I feel I was at least on the right track. And now I'm encountering people who are my peers now that have been in my youth group. It's very gratifying to re-encounter them and to hear that they have mainly good memories and it was mainly positive influence. When you teach, when you want to be a teacher, you desire an honorable and noble and good thing, but you've got to make sure of several things. One is you got to make sure that that's either you can learn how to work within the confines of the realities of what it takes and means to teach, or your nature and your personality need to be suited to that. Okay, you need to know you're called, that this is something God has designed into you, and you need to be paying very careful attention to what the content is of your teaching, both. And if you're in school as a teacher, the academic content and the life content, you've got to pay attention. Paul writes to Timothy, these people they have the desire, they don't lack that, to be teachers, specifically teachers of the law. That there's a meaning in that. We touched on it before, but I want to hit it again. First of all, when Paul wrote this letter to Timothy, there was no Bible other than the Old Testament, what we call the Old Testament, but for them that was the Bible. There were books of history, books of prophecy, books of wisdom, and the law. Jews focused heavily, even I would say primarily, on the law. And all of the other books reinforced or elucidated the meaning and nuance of the law. By Paul's day, we know this. My nose is just giving me fits today, folks. My apologies. But we notice in Paul's writings, particularly in Galatians, that there are a lot of Christians who are being held hostage by the law instead of informed by it. And how that happened was the law, the teachers became not just teachers, but enforcers. It's my opinion that that's what these people were after. They wanted to be enforcers of the law, but they didn't know what they were talking about. The real meaning, the real depth of the actual message of the law they hadn't gotten it yet. Okay, there are implications for that actually matter a lot for us. We're going to come back to those next time when we get together again on So Care with Stevie Boy.